We're good? Okay. We'll call the meeting to order. Everybody has an agenda in front of them. Is there any changes or additions to the agenda anybody would like today? If not, we can get a motion to accept the agenda. Everybody able to hear me? Okay. Jennifer, can you hear me? Thumbs up. I'm getting nothing. Tamara, can you hear me? Okay, obviously not. What, am I doing something wrong here, guys? Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes, Tamara.
Okay,
Yeah, loud and clear.
okay. I'll start over. I've been jabbering away here and getting no response from anybody, so we'll try again. We'll call the meeting to order. And will anybody have anything they'd like to change on the agenda? No problem. If not, no changes to the agenda, we'll need a motion to accept.
I can accept the agenda.
Okay, Murray, thank you.
Great.
All in favor? Jennifer, we'll just go down the list. Jennifer?
In favor.
Tamara?
In favor.
Levitt's going to join us in about 10 minutes. Brian?
In favor.
John?
In favor.
Merrill's in favor. Accepted of the agenda. Minutes from October 30th, 2019. Any corrections or amendments?
I can move those minutes.
Okay, Jennifer gives a motion for acceptance. All in favor. Tamara?
In favor.
Brian?
Favor.
John?
In favor.
Murray?
In favor.
Merrill's in favor. Carried. 2020 operating budget. Carlos or Brian? Brian Badura, you want to start there?
Sure, I can get us started on the 2020 proposed final operating budget memo here. Before I do start on the memo, what we brought forward is the final proposed budget with the, now that we know our assessment, with mill rate changes that were included in the budget, as well as any other department changes that have come about since December 10th when the interim budget was approved. I'll quickly go through the beginning of the memo just to ensure, like I said, it's on paper, but I'll just quickly read through what the purpose, background, and rationale of the budget is. On an annual basis, Council considers a proposed operating budget and 10-year capital plan, 10-year capital forecast, and adopts the operating and capital budgets for the coming year. The budget process involves Council, department heads, staff, and the public, and takes into account current economic conditions, provincial policy changes, and service needs within the municipality. Strategic priorities are set by Council, directly influence the budget process. In December each year, Council approves an interim budget, which is in effect for part of the coming year. The final budget is typically approved early in April after final assessment and requisition amounts are known. After the budget is adopted by Council, expenditures are controlled against budget by formal purchasing policies and financial systems designed specifically to prevent budget overruns If council approves additional expenditures during the year, the additional spending becomes an approved budget variance. The Municipal District of Taber, under the Municipal Government Act, is required to have a balanced budget. Expenditures may not exceed the total revenues, transfers from restricted surplus, and proceeds from debt. Financial information is monitored through budget variance analysis at the functional level, which is available to management on a daily basis, as well as financial information packages, which are provided to council on a monthly basis. The Municipal Government Act requires council to adopt a budget each calendar year. Current revenue, including transfers from restricted surplus and proceeds from debt, must be at least sufficient to pay the estimated expenditures and transfers, not including amortization of tangible capital assets. So that's just the introduction for a little understanding on the budget requirements in the Municipal Government Act and the timing and how it's prepared. And if we can just, before we get into the actual numbers in the budget, if we can move ahead our list to the schedule or the timeline. So the budget plan, it's a spreadsheet right there with the blue and the yellow on it, and that just outlines the plan that we have in place for developing and getting a budget in place for we're finishing off the cycle for the 2020 budget year here soon, and this will be the cycle for the 2020-2021 budget year. So we're about at the end of April on the plan, and getting into the beginning of May, where we're at the point where we're doing a finance committee meeting, and then we'd be bringing forward any recommendations to council and a mill rate bylaw here in the month of May. Then in June, we'll start the process over again and begin the 2021 budget process with the staff and directors. I just wanted to pause there, make sure if somebody has any questions, just go ahead and ask them anytime, so I don't keep talking and talking.
No, I think you're doing good. Carry on.
So, and just to continue on for the, it's a big schedule, but what I wanted to display to the Finance Committee was the start of the budget. We started with the 2019 approved budget, and we went through the budget process September 16th to October 30th to December 10th with numerous, or three, I guess, Finance Committee meetings. And on December 10th, we approved an interim budget, and then just how it changed over those periods. And from December 10th to May 1st is where we're at today. And on the far right-hand side of our proposed final operating budget, there is just changes in the property taxes, that we're proposing now that we have the final assessments and mill rates, and then a few changes in a few of the other departments. And what that leaves us with is a final budget surplus of $54,747 once if these proposed budgets are to be approved. So on the memo again, the 2020 proposed final operating budget projects a $54,747 operating budget surplus, In 2019, there was a budgeted $535,422 operating budget deficit. This amount includes the non-cash expense of $4,438,414 for amortization. And the reason that's important, again, is municipalities have to approve a balanced budget. However, the expenditure for amortization is not included in that calculation. So I guess technically, the way I read the act, the MDA Tabor can have a budget operating deficit of up to $4,438,000 and still comply with the Municipal Government Act. So to continue on in the memo, from our December 10th interim budget, what we had approved in the budget was a 2% increase in the residential property tax mill rate, a 2% increase in the non-residential property tax mill rate, and a 9% increase in farmland property mill rate. As well, in December, the final operating budget also included implementation of a minimum tax or a minimum per parcel tax. Based on the 2019 tax year, there was an estimated 907 property tax rolls that would be subject to a minimum $30 property tax. The total tax revenue from those rolls was $10,580. The minimum property tax, if applied to those parcels, would generate an additional $16,630. With these proposed tax rate increases, the 2020 final budget projects a net 2020 property tax revenue decrease of $134,885 from 2019.
Brian, I have a quick question for you. You talked about you've got the final assessment numbers. Are those lower this year? Is that why the overall property tax revenue is in a decreased position?
Yes. So when we had preliminary numbers and we were approving the preliminary or interim budget, we were estimating about an 8.5% decrease in our total municipal assessment. What it worked out to, there was about a 3.5% decrease in assessment, which is about $70 million. We're roughly at just over $2 billion of assessment, and we lost $70 million. Now that's 3.5%. However, we were planning to lose approximately 8.5% of our assessment.
Uh-huh.
So we were figuring on having less assessment than we ended up with.
And those numbers now, they can't change for this year. Like if they were to change their assessment model on oil and gas or non-residential, the numbers that you've got now were good for that for this year, right?
We should be good for this year. There always are changes that come from the province with regards to linear assessments and the designated industrial property. However, I don't think any change in the assessment model is going to be implemented for the current year. I believe early on in the year, that change that we were contemplating was put on hold so that the government or the provincial government could do some more robust consultations. I haven't heard of any consultations happening or if they've already occurred and they're over with. However, that's where we were left off with was those changes we were anticipating weren't implemented, and it was announced they were going to have some more robust consultations before they implement them.
Okay.
I can update you a little bit there, Brian. There were meetings scheduled for this, but they've been canceled due to the COVID. So we don't know what's going on right now. Everything's on hold. So I think what you see is what you'll get for this year.
Yeah, I guess that was my point, or my question. They can't come in another month and say, no, we've changed it all. Hopefully what we've got is what we've got for the year, right?
Yes, I believe that's what we've got. Yeah, you're correct.
And that's our belief also, Merrill. That's certainly what they're telling us, that any future changes will be just that in the future.
Okay. It just makes budgeting really hard if they were to turn around and change things in a month, but as long as we're good for this year, we're good.
It wouldn't be the first time we've been surprised, but that's what we're being told.
Okay.
So again, I guess the 2020 property tax revenue decrease with these changes implement would still leave us with a net decrease of $134,885 from 2019. Now, in the 2020 final budget, we're providing for the same allowance for uncollectible taxes as 2019, mostly in the non-residential assessment categories of $917,000. With the current probable projections already as high as $2.5 million. The MDA Tabor had reserved $1,029,000 as uncollectible property tax attributable to oil and gas properties in 2018, and has reserved $1,419,000 in 2019, while recovering $773,000 in previous year's bad debts. At December 31st, 2019, non-residential property taxes outstanding were in excess of $2 million. And since the end of the year 2019, we haven't had a whole lot of those tax dollars come in. I'd say maybe $50,000 or $60,000 of that amount we've recovered. The MDA Tabor significantly reduced operating expenditures across the organization to accommodate the reductions in the assessment base. The actual value and assessment base change from 2019 to 2020 is a decrease of approximately $70 million in assessment. And so again, that works out to about 3.5%.
I just have a question about the uncollected taxes. Is this okay?
Yep.
So as we continue on this path, what route do we end up having? And I understand the whole land sales and all those things, but, you know, at this rate, do you anticipate the same for 2020, 2021? Like, as we move forward, this is getting quite substantial, and it definitely will have an impact, and especially if we see a change in assessment and depreciation and things like that. So just makes me wonder, sure, we can do today's budget for this year, and I know as a municipality we can't look too far forward, but I do think we have to sort of keep it in our sights. So just wondering what your concerns are as we move forward on uncollected taxes and changes in assessment.
So that's a really good question. It's hard to predict the future. However, what I believe is the most logical progression is the numbers we're seeing in uncollectible taxes. Eventually, those assessments or those tax dollars won't be on our tax rolls anymore. If we do see bankruptcies, those assessments will be zeroed out. We would no longer even levy those taxes, so they would no longer show up as uncollectible. And eventually, as we see a new assessment model, if or when it's implemented, there will be lower taxes. If wells or there's abandoned wells, they're put in the hands of the orphan well fund, there will be no assessment on them again, and hence don't have these large uncollectible or bad debts in year, 2 years, 3 years, however long it takes. However, we won't have that tax or that assessment to tax on in the first place, I guess.
Thank you for clarifying that for me.
Could I have a follow-up question too, Meryl?
Yep.
Brian, what new assessment has come on? We've got a couple wind or solar projects and a fertilizer plant. What raises are being in Linear?
And I'm not certain of that, but I do have Brent McQuaig in the meeting, so maybe he can answer that better than I can if he's aware of any new assessment that's been coming on the roll.
Hey everybody. So as far as the two solar projects, we did change the land on those and some of the improvements to market value. So for the 2020 assessment year, I don't know if those ones are coming, if those solar projects, if they're going to be operational before October 30th of this year. So that'd be for the 2020 assessment year. The electrical generation on those two solar sites, that would be Linear. And then before I give it my delegation, the land will also go to DIP. So that'll both, the land and the improvements for the two solar projects will fall under the Linear and DIP assessments. And then as far as the fertilizer facility, last time I talked to Rob Cobham, he said that should be coming online. He said they're still hoping to be operational for the end of September. So that'll be mostly our assessment, and then there'll be some, there'll also be some linear railway assessment with that as well.
Brent, what kind of numbers are we talking on the solar projects?
The solar projects, I haven't received any number from them as far as what their overall tax dollars is. If you want, I could do some research on, or make a call out to Linear to see if they've received the total reported costs on those, and what they project the assessment will be for when they're both online. That'd be about the best I could do at the moment.
Okay.
And then the FCL project, I do have most of his reported costs, not all of them, of course, until I get the rest of them back this summer, this fall. But I can come up with a better number for that going forward as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
There was a report put out just to try to analyze what the solar, the assessment impacts would be for solar on these large farms, and the number that came out based on what the project in Brooks was about $10,000 per megawatt in final taxation dollars, I guess, and that could be slightly less given that the cost of installing solar has dropped over the last little while, but that was just a rough number that they proposed.
Okay, Brian, you want to carry on, Badura?
Okay, so just to carry on, if the other next item I just wanted to point out is if we scroll down to the calculation of the mill rate spreadsheet, and we'll take a look at the 2%, 9%, I guess, mill rate increases. So if we could scroll down to that, yeah, that one there, and just zoom in a little bit. So in this schedule here, we've got the 2% increase for the residential, 2% increase for non-residential, and 9% increase in farmland. And that generates $398,000, $398,405 in additional revenues. The item I didn't include in the memo, and maybe I should have included something to that effect, was we passed a bylaw to subclass the non-residential assessment category into small business and then other non-residential properties. I haven't included any change in the mill rate for the small business class. Now, we can reduce the mill rate on small business class assessment by up to 25% of our regular non-residential mill rate. If there is any discussion or I guess looking at if that's something that we want to introduce or begin doing, is providing a little bit of relief to the small business class.
What's anybody's thoughts on that?
So would that be like the Grassy Lake restaurant? And I just use that as an example because that's what's on the next page when we did the comparison. I was, I'm always surprised at what small business pays in tax, but perhaps those are the services they utilize as well. So I was curious on that.
So, and again, maybe I'll ask Brent McQuaig to, if he can answer that question for Councillor Mianega.
Okay. Yeah, I just started looking at those this morning. So were they successful in their application? I haven't been through that list to see if they were on that or not. And if they were,
Brent, I'm okay that it's not specific to that restaurant. I guess I just am trying to understand what cost savings they would incur by being a small business without criteria we set forward.
okay. Well, I guess it depends how much you want to put against it. I don't have their overall assessment in front of me unless it's on this list here, and I can go and look it up. And just give me a couple minutes and carry on. I can go and look up their assessment and give you a good number, basically give you a 10, 15, 20, 25% on their cost savings.
Question for Councillor Mianega. Would it be okay if he used a different example that he has on his list in front of him?
Of course, I'm not actually looking for specific. I'm just trying to understand the implications that bylaw could have on our revenue generating as well, taking into account, and I realize that's not necessarily how we determine mill rates, but the challenging economic times that these businesses have faced, especially of late.
Brent, is it easier to just grab an example off of the list that you have in front of you?
Yep. So, I mean, as far as the small business, once they're approved, if all of their assessment, say if you were a small business and your assessment was 250,000, and then we can speculate off of that, I guess.
And I can add to that. So if you look at the mill rates for non-residential property, the school mill rate is about 3.7, the municipal mill rate is 9.4, and then there's a school mill rate of a housing authority mill rate of about 0.1. About 70% of non-residential taxes are municipal. So factoring in that 70% of property taxes would be non-residential. If we gave let's say a 10% decrease in the mill rate, they would see about a 7% reduction in their total tax bill. So if that makes any sense, a 10% reduction in the municipal mill rate the Grassy Lake store or whatever example would see approximately a 7% reduction in their total tax bill.
Okay, good. That helps me understand that. Thank you.
Yep, that sounds good. Thanks, Brian.
And as far as the factors go, with the total tax generated of $192,309 from the that assessment category, obviously, if we implemented a 10% reduction in their mill rate, that would cost us $19,000. If we did a 25% reduction in that mill rate, which is the maximum we're allowed, it would end up generating, I guess we'd generate $48,000 less revenue. It wouldn't cost us, but we'd have that much less revenue.
Okay, anybody else, excuse me, anybody else have any questions on that for Brian? I guess carry on then, Brian.
Okay, so that being said, what we've concluded in the proposed final budget is 2% increase in residential, 2% in non-residential mill rate, and a 9% increase in the farmland mill rate. The bottom of this schedule, we've got some samples. If we just scroll down a little bit, and these samples are the same roll numbers we've used for the past 15 or so years from various locations throughout the municipality. And the comparison is the assessment change and on the far right-hand side, the tax dollar change from 2019 to 2020. So as you can see in the list, the residential properties we've identified, it's dependent on how much of assessment change there was, but the majority of the properties we're seeing did see a decrease in their assessments. And even with a 2% increase in the municipal mill rate, they will be paying less property taxes in 2020 than they were in 2019. The properties that are in green, seeing a little bit of an increase, probably did not see much, if any, increase in their assessment, and that's reflective of the mill rate increase that we're seeing. The 3 parcels of farmland, so we've identified 160 acres of dry land, 160 acres of irrigation, and 160 acres of pasture. They're, after we do a 9% mill rate increase in the municipal mill rate, as well as the change in the school mill rates, they will see about a 7.3% increase in their total taxes. It does seem like a big percentage increase. However, if you look at the example for 160 acres of pasture, it increases by about $4.50 for the year.
And most of these, with the red, the decrease in the overall, or the percent change, most of it has to do with assessments going down, Brian?
Yes, yeah, that's correct. And Brent has anything to add, he can add. It's the ones in red would have to do with assessments going down.
Okay.
Meryl, could I get some clarification from Brent on assessment? Some of these big companies, and I'll just use Lamb Weston for example, as the economy goes down, is their assessment, is their value going to start shrinking, and could that be a double-edged sword for us?
Well, for what we have right now, there wasn't any real change. I left the value on the overall building and so forth the same. The only thing that changed in their assessment this year was the changes, the additions and deletions for their M&E, and then of course just depreciation, regular depreciation. And then the land, the highway commercial land didn't change, but of course if they were to see going forward, if they had to adjust. I can't speak toward the market yet, because I mean, right now we're kind of in uncharted territory, and we're kind of looking to see what's going to happen going forward provincially with the assessments, if there's going to be any direction from the government because of the pandemic. And I mean, looking outside of the municipality, they're talking about big change, as far as a recession and so forth. So I think it's too early to say yet what their change in assessment could be, if any.
Fair comment, thanks.
Any other questions at all on the spreadsheet there with the assessment on the different farmland, homes, etc.? Okay, carry on, Brian.
Okay, and just as part of the property tax presentation, if we scroll down a little bit further, we come to our mill rate comparison spreadsheet. So these are still 2019 mill rates. Most municipalities are in the process of approving the mill rate bylaws. We weren't able to get accurate figures for the 2020 mill rates from the other municipalities, but this is a comparison of where we fit in with other surrounding municipalities and our mill rate, as well as a minimum tax. That seems like it's being implemented more and more. And if there's no questions on that, just the very next page, if we scroll down one more, is again the information we provided during the interim budget with the various minimum taxes and how many properties it would likely impact, as well as the additional revenue that these various minimum taxes would generate for the MD. Okay, and
Okay.
if there's no questions, we can continue on with the final budget changes or inclusions.
Okay, go ahead, Brian.
Okay, so back to the memo, if we go to the next page of the memo. The remainder of the budget changes, like I said, we only brought forward any departmental changes from the interim budget that was approved on December 10th. And the significant changes that we've included in the budget in the Agricultural Services Department, we had information that the Ag Service Board grant was going to decrease by $46,034. And I can just, I didn't have it on the memo, but I can pull up those numbers and let you know. So in prior years, it's been very consistent. We've got about $168,360 for an Ag Service Board grant. We're looking at it reducing down to $122,326. The Lands and Lease Department, and rather than me going through it, there's a few changes recommended by Brian Pierce. maybe he can go through these rather than myself doing that for the land and lease department changes.
Hello. I guess the lion's share of the $250,000 decrease in oil and gas lease revenues would come from the recent announcement that Sandling hasn't been paying their other service revenues currently. The other lands revenue, the $30,000, is anticipated, and basically that comes from pipeline. We sign up for on our own land, and there was like a couple larger pipeline projects that were proposed by CNRL that have been held off, so that's where that comes from. The MCCAC investment agreement, or the solar project that we're entering into with recently, I guess, well, as Arlo said, sent out an email yesterday, the IRCAN, the community, the irrigation district, Tabor, and Maine have agreed in principle to enter into an agreement with the MDA Tabor under this agreement to own that project. It's a pilot project to put the 2 megawatts of solar. But it's on the oil and gas. And that's a bit of a has to be accounted for, but it's a bit of a net zero, I guess, on our end as far as revenue. But the grant itself is a $2.1 million grant from CCAC over to Innovate to the MDA Tabor to disperse to the project owner. The contribution is $1.5 million that will come from year's time. Will be their contribution for the construction of the project, and the $900,000 is primarily in grant contribution from Canadian Solar, who is by their solar panels at their cost, basically. So that's $700,000. $800,000 is just in time from the different partnering organizations that are putting this together. So India had a little bit of in mind, but us from the other partnership or groups. So I ended up being about a $4.5 million project that is it'll be 2022.
Hey, Brian.
Brian. Bryce just says I'm breaking up really badly.
Yeah, it is breaking up pretty bad. It's hard to understand what you're saying.
And I don't know how to fix that just because our internet is intermittent here. So okay. I guess that's probably the reason.
Brian, try turning off your video stream. Sometimes your voice will help.
And you don't have to look at me either.
Okay, it started right at the beginning, Brian. If you want to start right back at oil and gas lease revenue, see if we can hear you this time.
Is that any better?
That sounds good so far.
Okay. Sorry about that. You should have piped in and told me earlier. So the $250,000 that we're anticipating is decreased oil and gas lease revenues primarily comes from the recent announcement that Sandline has stopped paying their leases. We have about 135 of those, so it could be upwards a little bit higher than that, I guess. And decrease in other land revenue as a result of some larger pipeline jobs that CNRL had anticipated doing this year that they've pulled back on. So, on the MCCAC, how does that better now? Or no? Still can't hear me?
Brian, maybe just talk a little bit slower, and then you may not cut in as much, just as an attempt.
Okay, Arlo, how's that?
Excellent.
If this doesn't work, I can just call in on the line too, I suppose. Does that work, Bryce, or no, rather than come through Zoom?
That would work as well, yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll try once more. If this doesn't work, we'll try something different. So, $250,000 that we're anticipating a decrease in gas revenue is from Stanley. You get thumbs up this person? Or not?
Hi, Brian. We'll stop you there again. Why don't you just phone in?
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep.
So bottom line, Brian Badura, we've got a balanced budget going here. We're with a little bit of a surplus, which is good to see. You've been able to find savings within to create that balanced budget. Is there anything more outstanding that you need to let us know on how you achieve that, or?
To answer the first question, there are later on coming up in the Finance Committee agenda, there are a couple items. There were some resolutions from the last council meeting to bring forward some items to the Finance Committee. However, they're not included in this budget right now. They'd be additions that would be added, and they are they're all expenditure items. So yes, we do have currently a budget surplus of
54.
Yeah, 54,747. However, once we get through this item here, we still have the additional item, the 3 items with resolutions from council coming forward, which could potentially swing us into a deficit position. However, we have had deficits before, and we are allowed to budget for deficits up to the amount of our amortization of about $4.4 million.
Okay. Is Brian yet? Anybody have any questions for Brian while we're waiting for?
I got.
Go ahead,
Merrill. When it comes to the legislative, at 396, I know we've been under by quite a bit the last few years. I wonder if that should better reflect of what we've done the last few years rather than that high, to have some extra money for the upcoming things in the meeting.
I'm not sure if I understood.
I think Levitt was saying that the legislative area, we haven't been as high as 396 for a couple of years. I think we were 320 last year or something like that. Can that be better reflected, or is the 396 more than normal over the last, say, 5 or 10 years?
I'm not seeing, sorry, the 396 is in reference to
The legislative council expenses?
Oh, council expenditures. Sorry. I just need to find my my right paper here, and I can't seem to find it.
It is on page 10 of the agenda, if that's helpful, but it's also the first page of the final operating budget.
Brian?
Join the meeting.
Okay, just to finish off Councillor Howe's question, the 396 that we've budgeted, I believe it is lower than than what we've experienced in the past for council expenditures. And this the budget amount is in anticipation of the regular amount of meetings and expenditures for council based on the policy. It seems to be an adequate amount to fund those amounts. And I know I was looking at that myself. And for example, the spring convention in Edmonton was canceled, and unique items like that, by not having those expenditures, just provide for budget savings. So even though we do have a budget figure of $396,835, if the current economic situation continues, or what's happening right now, I believe the $396,835 would likely be an adequate budget for the coming year.
That answer your question, Levitt?
Yep.
Okay. Brian is back on the line now, so thank you, Brian. We'll turn it back over to you, Brian Pierce.
All right. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, wow. All right. Okay. For the third or fourth time, we'll try it again. The oil and gas lease revenue that we're anticipating decrease in is primarily due to the fact that Sandling Energy has given notice to us that they won't be paying their leases currently in the next while or at all. So that's where that number comes from. It could be slightly higher. The other $30,000 is attributed to a couple larger CNRL pipeline projects that have been on hold recently. Still hearing me okay?
Yep.
Okay. The MCCAC project, the details of that, the financing and that is kind of a net zero to the MD of Taber, but still has to be accounted for in our budget. The MCCAC in Alberta Innovates is providing $2.1 million towards the project, and that's in the second line there. We have recently heard that Iracan will be providing the partner dollars for this project to the tune of $1.5 million. That's St. Mary's Irrigation District, Taber Irrigation District, and Raymond Irrigation District. And the other $900,000 in-kind support is primarily from Canadian Solar, who is providing their solar panels at cost, which is for $700,000, and $200,000 is jointly in-kind staff support from the various organizations that are part of this project.
Could I get some clarification from Brian?
Sure.
Brian, on this project, SMRID or Iracan has approved this at the board level? I had heard differently.
It hasn't. Where it sits now is that we've met with the Taber Irrigation District. Their board has given their support to the project. St. Mary's had a meeting yesterday, the day before, and are throwing their support behind it. So it just has to go to the Iracan board for a final resolution, I guess. So it's not official, but it looks like it's going to happen.
Okay, it was the SMRID that I wasn't sure of, and I hadn't heard that they'd had their meeting, so thanks.
Yeah. Okay, moving down. Any more questions on that, those two items? Okay. For the lands and leases, we have an estimate of $34,000 in service lease share expenditures, and that I think that will likely be our revenues from oil companies. For the leases, we won't be returning their portion back, their lease share portion back to them as well. So that they will receive it if we get it, but if we're not providing that back to them. So that could be actually slightly more than that, given the number of leases that Sandling has. It could be upwards of $50,000 or $55,000. So I guess I just did some rough numbers this morning, based on the surface right board applications that I either have out or will be putting out. The Sandling ones will be, there's about, say, 135 of them roughly, which equates to about $350,000. So just given the timelines that the surface right board has been paying these leases, we probably won't see that in those 2020 payments until 2021 if everything stays the same with the board. We should see the other ones, the other 30 or so that we have been applying for already, about $80,000. So it's mainly the Sandling ones that we're not going to see in 2020. As far as the just as a background, I guess for you folks, what we pay back in oil and gas lease payback to the different leases is, for tax recovery lands, is $160,000 roughly. The cultivation leases is $40,000, and the MD grazing leases is about $3,000. And then the distinction between the cultivation leases and the MD grazing leases is it's a proportion of what rent they pay. So that's the cultivation leases pay higher rent, therefore they receive more back in oil and gas payments. Also, I guess on top of that, we talk about planning for the future and then the unknowns that may come along with the taxes in the fall, just from things you hear or some of the payments that we receive that we're either receiving late or have to chase down some of the companies too that we're just a little unsure of too. That there's 3 or 4 that I can talk to Brian about that we can maybe narrow that down or have a little better understanding, I guess, what we should anticipate from taxes from some of these companies come November. That's about, I guess, all from my end. Brian, do you have anything else you need from me?
Those are everything I had included in the budget, in the final budget.
Okay.
Okay, any questions for Brian Pierce or Brian Badura? So that's the operating side.
I have a question for Brian.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question for Brian Pierce. I'm just wondering on these the leaseholders of this municipal land that we own, when we're not paid surface rights, the surface access by oil companies, is that then not paid to the landowner? Is that how that works?
Yes, if we don't receive our payment, they don't receive theirs. And I'm just keeping a spreadsheet of when we do get payments from the Surface Rights Board. That I don't know at what interval, but we'll release those funds. We'll have accounting release those funds back to those folks as we receive them. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, so that's the operating side of things. Is there any more questions on the operating budget? Then we'll turn it to Brian for the capital budget.
And before we move to the capital budget, just have a quick question. Do we want to jump to the later on in the agenda? We have the a couple items. The one is the non-residential property tax deferral, as well as the resolutions from council. Should we just continue on with the capital and then get to those when we get to them?
Brian, what's your thought on that? Just because they are, I guess, shorter agenda items, or?
No, just to keep continuity of where we are in the operating budget. The resolutions would be operating budget items.
Yeah, that's a fair point. We could skip if council's in agreement. We could skip to agenda item 6, followed by 7.
Yeah, that's good. That's fine with me. Go ahead, Brian. We'll go to 6.
Okay. This is information just we wanted to bring forward with regards to the Alberta government's non-residential property tax deferral, and they've issued some guidelines for municipalities. We've had some online meetings with some direction from the province on how they would like municipalities to implement the education portion of property taxes that's to be deferred on non-residential. Essentially, what the province had announced is the required payment of the education portion of non-residential property tax is deferred for a 6-month period from April 1st to September 30th. And municipalities are not obligated to defer any municipal property tax. So we put together the information. However, municipal, penalty date of November 15th falls outside of the dates that the province is requesting, or not just requesting. They've indicated there's a deferral of education tax. At this point, we already comply with the deferral, and we just wanted to provide this information in case there's anything council wants to discuss with regards to the property tax deferral.
So with our tax deadline being in November, we actually fall outside of the guidelines for them wanting us to extend flexible payment options for them, or we're still being asked to do that?
The only requirement is to defer the education portion of property taxes for 6 months to September 30th, and not apply any penalties until that date. It is at the discretion of municipalities to provide any additional payment options or deferrals for any property tax category. We've sort of called and asked other surrounding municipalities what they intend to do to comply, or if they're doing anything additional. So if we want to scroll past the guidelines, there's a schedule of what other municipalities have, or I guess have implemented or are looking at implementing. So at the top of the list, the MDA Tabor has a November 15th due date, 5% penalties applied to current taxes, and then January 1st to 12% penalties applied. Newell County, their initial collection date was June 15th, 3% penalty. They're waiving that. And in addition, they're offering an 8% discount if anyone pays taxes by June 15th. They indicated if they receive all their taxes on June 15th from everybody, it'll essentially have a cost of $2.5 million, or it'll impact their budget by $2.5 million, offering an 8% discount. Then again, they've gone above and beyond what the province has requested, and they're waiving their November 15th penalty of 8%. However, they are leaving their December 15th penalty of 5% in place, as well as the penalty on March 1st. So Cypress County, they actually just moved their penalty date from November 15th, this is the first year, to June 30th, with a 2.5% penalty. They're waiving it now to comply. The request to, or the province's instructions to not penalize education property tax for 6 months is very difficult to implement and calculate. Waiving a penalty only on that assessment class and only for non-residential properties. So what we're seeing is most municipalities are just waiving their entire penalty for all properties and all different types of taxes. It's quite I didn't want to use bureaucratic, but it's very confusing to try and just not penalize non-residential education property taxes.
It's interesting, Brian, that you replaced bureaucratic with confusing.
What's anybody's thoughts around the table? What are you guys thinking? Are we wanting to do something in this to help out, or leave the penalties and the dates the way they are? Anybody want to voice their opinion?
Brian, what would the cost be if we moved our November 15th to 2.5% rather than 5%? How significant would that be? Just split it in half till January 1st.
And that's a good question, but very difficult to answer. In the past, we haven't it hasn't had much of a revenue item for the municipality. However, in light of the current environment where we don't get a lot of oil companies paying their taxes at all anymore, we're essentially putting a 5% penalty on, and then we're writing it off as a bad debt. So when you say what's it going to cost to move it back, I don't see it as a significant cost. However, it gives us an earlier date gives us more assurance of actually how much property taxes we're going to collect. Otherwise, we can only speculate how much we're going to collect before the end of the year.
Anybody else have an opinion on changing the penalties or the deadlines?
What implication does it have administratively on our program? Do we have the capacity to do it with ease?
So if we did want to change the penalty, I think the question was to change from 5% to 2.5. Is that correct?
Yeah, just throwing numbers out there, Brian. I just spitballing something, yeah.
Yeah, so it wouldn't have a big dollar amount impact on our budget. It wouldn't per se cost much at all. The process would involve making an amendment to our tax penalty bylaw for the current year. We'd have to bring forward a tax penalty bylaw and give it 3 readings, indicate it's only for the current year, changing our penalty rate from 5% to 2.5%. That's essentially the process, and then do some public notification indicating it's reduced from 5% to 2.5. Now, whether it's lowered to 2.5 from 5 or waived completely, I believe the impact would be more along the lines of we'd see more people just not paying. So the lower the percentage penalty, the more likelihood individuals would say, well, it's not a lot of money. I won't pay. I'll pay before January 1st. And so it'll just delay the collection of taxes and not have a big financial impact as far as not collecting as much penalty, not dollars.
And that would be my fear of waiving it. That's why I'm thinking a reduction. And again, I'm not sure I'm in favor of it. Just seems to be the spirit of what the province is asking, is to help out in taxes.
I think with how late we have our tax collection date already, I feel if we just leave it the same way, but maybe advertise more of our monthly payment plan for our taxes, if anything, but just leave everything the same, but maybe advertise that more so that people know that they can apply monthly and it doesn't cost them anymore.
Okay, anybody else have anything? Go ahead.
I was going to say, I would have to agree with that, with our tax collection being so late already. And, that recommendation or what the government put out was from May to September 30. We're kind of outside that window anyways. And I'm thinking if we're already at the tail end, if we might already be on the hook for a lot of money because we're the last one to get paid anyway.
And that's a great comment. I think when I talked to Newell County, the reason for their discount that they're offering is they do want some surety of how much tax they're going to collect this year, and they want to know earlier on. And maybe they partly feel that some of the oil companies will pay them before they'll pay other municipalities their taxes.
So leaving it the way it is, November 15th, 5% penalty, January 1st, 12%. Is that the way everybody's thinking?
I would also add, like I think we've seen it once where someone has come and asked us to forgive their penalty. I mean, in the event that someone is in dire straits, or maybe when we get to that point, we can, if they're told they can request the council, then maybe they can, because we have done those things.
Okay, not hearing any more. I kind of in favor of leaving it the way it is. And like I said, we're 6 months, 6.5 months away from the penalty or the tax collection date. And if things start opening up here soon in the next little while, it gives everybody a chance to get their businesses rolling again. And anybody else have any thoughts? Carlos?
Just for council's information, we have had, at least that I'm aware of, at least two of our oil and gas companies touch base with us on a very preliminary basis, asking kind of what our plans were with regard to tax collection or tax penalties and payment plans and things like that. So we will take the information that we get from today's meeting and share that with them. Follow up to Jennifer's comment, if it be the desire of council with regard to those payment plan scenarios, then we will indicate to them that, yeah, we can visit those on a case-by-case basis, if that's what council's desire is. So just wanting you, council, to know for information that we've had at least two that I'm aware of approach us.
Our tax payment plan, that applies to all everyone, right? Not just residential or farm or non-res. It applies to everyone, so anyone can opt for that tax payment plan if they would like.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
So there is already options out there for them that people can opt into, and then there is, from what I've gathered, right, there's no penalty for opting into it. It's just we don't get all our money at once. We can just get it monthly.
Brian, can you unpack a little bit more how our TIP is administered, our tax installment payment plan?
Yes, Councillor Haug is correct. Our TIP program is open to any property owner, any type of tax or anything like that. We do mainly see, however, residential property owners subscribing to it just for the convenience of it. Most commercial companies, with regards to the dollar amount of taxes they pay, them holding on to their money for a longer period of time makes financial sense to them. So we haven't seen anyone subscribe to it except residential properties who like the convenience of the money just coming out of their account and they're not getting behind on their taxes.
Okay. Just a sec.
If it's going to be changed, I would suggest that a motion would be required. If there's no change desired, then it is the way it would stand the way it currently is.
Okay. Anybody wanting to change it, or is everybody in favor of just leaving it the way it is?
I personally feel that we already have tools in place if people want to defer their tax in a way by over a whole year of doing monthly payments. I feel like that's a good tool already in place, so I don't think we need to change any of our penalty dates.
I would agree.
Anybody else? Okay, I'm not hearing any, so let's assume we're going to leave it the way it is for now. And anybody can take advantage of the TIPS program, or they can come to council to make their plea for a change or a deferral or whatever they'd like. Next item, number 7, Brian.
So for agenda item number 7, we put together a little bit of a memo just to have the information that came from council available to finance committee on the 3 resolutions and a little bit more detail of the costs associated with those items. So I believe there were 3 items that were referred to further on for additional information or else to finance committee. So the first one was with regards to that administration submit the list of high priority projects as the MDA-Tabor priorities and get further clarification on what classifies shovel-ready projects. What we had with regard to that was the cost to bring high priority projects to tender-ready stage is estimated to be $283,500. However, I'm not sure if we do have a current definition of what shovel-ready is. I did some research on the internet. I don't know if there is a real answer of what shovel-ready means. It's a term used by governments. However, it's not really a term used by engineering firms or construction firms, what that term actually means. One definition was a project that can be undertaken or started within 90 days. It so would be one of the definitions of what shovel-ready is. And there's potential that a low to medium, or especially a low design complexity project at the preliminary design stage could be ready for construction in 90 days. And what we have is an estimate to get projects to the preliminary design stage to be 1% of the project cost. So, and possibly Craig can add a little bit more if it's any different than those costs.
Brian, I might be able to add a little bit there. I have asked around RMA, a couple MLAs, what their definition is. The best example I can get is some of the schools that have been approved did not have, they had a detailed or had a rough estimate. They did not have the full detailed estimate ready that have been approved. So by going what they've approved already, you don't have to have the final draft, but they do want a rough estimate. But that's not official. That's just an example of what's been used.
And from my perspective, so council's aware, I did submit that definitional question with regard to shovel-ready to municipal affairs. I sent that to them via email, still waiting back to hear. In that respect, if they can provide any more clarity or insight on that. That being said, at the end of the day, we want to try to move forward and get these ready regardless.
So this 283,500 to get the high priority projects to the tender ready stage, that has not been included in the budget. Is that correct, Carlos or Brian?
I think it's here to be considered for inclusion in the budget, yeah.
Okay.
Carlos, question. If we approve this in our budget and we find out that we don't need it, we're better off than not approving it and only having to do part of it. Is that correct? Be better to have the ability to do it than not.
Correct. That would be my perspective and approach. Yes.
So if it only costs half that, then that's a bonus.
Right. No, I mean, I would expect that if this is something that gets added and included in the budget, it's included for that very specific purpose, not to be spent differently.
Okay, what's everybody's thoughts? You obviously see what it'll do to the budget numbers that Brian has presented to us. You want to carry on and add these projects, this money into the budget?
I do think we need to add them into the budget. It's something that we have to definitely address and take care of. I wonder if there is some areas though where we could maybe tighten up our numbers a bit, and going back to Levitt's point with our legislative, over the last few years we've been substantially under budget. Maybe in our 2019 year we bring it down $25,000 to $30,000, and that, I mean, I know that's just a drop in the bucket when we're looking at 280, but just for that specific, but it is a start.
Like I said, I'm not sure how it's going to end up in the budget or what the effect on the budget is, but if we have an opportunity to get some projects done that might have been back burner stuff for a number more years, with the provincial stimulus that supposedly is coming, we should probably do our best to take advantage of that.
So perhaps Brian Badura can expand on this based on some of our past experience and past practice. But our intent would be to, like, if we could have some of these projects ready to go, our intent would be to recover some of those preparatory costs that we're talking about right now in the actual funding process. We would just be recovering them at a later date. Brian Badura, is that something you can expand on?
Yes, as these projects go forward, in the event that there is no additional funding from the province, we likely would proceed with them through MSI grant funding. I believe that's what it's scheduled for, and if that's the case, any preliminary engineering or design engineering tender preparation would be applied for and funded through MSI capital funding in any event. I guess there is a potential that if we are including the full amount to get into tender ready stage, that these all be included in the capital budget, and we carry them forward as construction in progress. And in the next year or two, if there's no immediate funding available, we apply for them as MSI capital grants, and then that revenue offsets the expenditures.
Now, all of these projects, Arlos or Brian, would have to be contracted out to get them tender ready, or do we have the ability in-house to get them tender ready?
I think there could be a potential for a combination of both, but we would need to source additional help. Yeah.
Okay. Everybody's thoughts on that one? Do you want to move ahead with this?
I think the opportunity's there, and so we wouldn't want to miss. You know, government has to see future planning, not just in this imminent concern what we're dealing with. So if we have an opportunity to capture additional resources, I think let's go for it.
Okay. So do we want to make a motion to recommend to council to proceed with getting the high priority projects to the tender ready stage?
I can make that motion, Meryl. It's Tamara.
Okay. Tamara's made it, give us a motion to recommend to council to bring all high priority projects to the tender ready stage at a cost estimated to be $283,500. Does that sound okay, Tamara?
Yes, that's good with me. And as long as administration has a solid plan to execute, I think council, myself, I support that.
Okay. Tamara's given the motion. All in favor? Jennifer?
In favor.
Levitt, you still here? Brian?
In favor.
John?
In favor.
Murray?
In favor.
Merrill's in favor. Levitt? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Next item is the Southern Alberta Connectivity Partnership.
Okay, and I'll just introduce it, and maybe Bryce can talk a little bit about these two items. So the resolution from council was to support the ongoing participation and support through the allocation of funds by directing administration to include in the budget. So this particular item, it's a municipal contribution upfront of $419,150 and an annual operating and maintenance cost of $50,402. So looking at it as far as the cost of being just under $500,000 for the first year, and then $57,000 each additional year, would likely be just a grant to another organization, a municipal controlled corporation or some legal entity that's created through the partnership through these other municipalities. And so essentially, if we want to budget for it in 2020, we'd have to increase expenditures by just under $500,000 in the budget. And each year go forward an additional expenditure of $57,000 to continue on with this project. But Bryce is on; he can explain if that's correct.
Yeah, Brian, that is correct. When you take a look at the project as a whole, there is that upfront cost along with the ongoing operations and maintenance of equipment and such that support the system as a whole as part of the partnership. Maybe better to just open up for any kind of questions in relation to it. As you know, it's pretty fresh, I think, in everybody's minds. But
is this an expenditure that is going to have to happen in 2020, or is it something in 2021?
That's a good question. For sure, it's something that we're going to probably get a little more clarification on that as we move into the next month or so here. We're going to be conducting an RF EOI, which will reach out to industry for options and opportunities. So from an expression of interest perspective, and we're hoping that clarifies our moves forward as a partnership with municipalities based on the feedback. So based on experience of timelines and such, there's a fairly good chance that it would be a 2021 budget item. But it's, of course, one of those things where it's still 6 months left of the year here. So there is a chance that we could require those funds in this year to secure that partnership.
So The admin team, if it's a budget item that has to be paid this year, where do we get the money? Or have we got the money somewhere?
So I can add to that. I believe what the intention would be if we did go with a project is to make an application under MSI Capital funding for this. Now, even though it is a flow through where we're granting money to another organization, I have a feeling it could be fundable, but I'm not 100% certain. It'd be nice to just do an application for MSI, see for certain if we do get approval on this joint project with all these with the other municipalities. However, being that it's essentially a grant to a municipal controlled corporation, I'm not 100% certain it would get approval for MSI capital funding. But that would be a potential of where to get funding. If MSI capital funding, if the application doesn't get approved, it'd just be municipal reserves to fund this.
Okay.
I have a question on that. I was just wondering, so would this, since there's 7 municipalities involved here, would this also have a possibility of being approved under the stimulus package and shovel-ready projects that the province is offering here? Or is this something that would be outside of that?
I think it's something that should be explored at that point in time. We've yet to see any details of those stimulus packages, but I think that question has definitely been thought of by the group. And I think they would pursue it if it's something we could capitalize on. Really, the overarching concept here is earmarking funds to show the commitment to the partnership and keeping council kind of in the loop as we progress through that partnership.
I would think that where so many municipalities are working together, collaborating together, that would be a higher one for funding. I would think, but that's just my thought on that. So if you think we can get, you're saying you think you can get it through MSI, or you're just not sure yet, Brian? I'm
just not sure. I can get an application in fairly quick. However, it takes months to get the final approvals in a normal year, and I'm just not certain that this would get approval. But it's definitely worth trying to get that funding through MSI.
And we've got it in reserve if we can't get it somewhere else?
Yes. No, there'd be money in reserves to fund this as well if there is no grant funding available.
Okay. So in order for it to move forward, we need another motion to recommend to council to continue supporting the Southern Alberta Connectivity Partnership.
Or potentially to include in the 2020 final operating budget if it's going to be a 2020 expenditure.
Bryce, there's also the federal option. There is money out there now through the federal government on broadband projects, so it might fall into that category as well.
Yeah, to refer back to what Arliss had mentioned, the group has actually talked just briefly on it because there really wasn't a whole lot of information out there available. But absolutely, we will definitely be keeping those different opportunities at the table. And that CRTC funding that I think you're referring to is coming up for another phase soon. So there may be an opportunity that comes along with that, and certainly it would be a preferred option.
Okay, anybody else have any more questions on this one? There's a recommended motion on page 41 that council supports the ongoing participation in the Southern Alberta Connectivity Partnership as an investment in a core network infrastructure opportunity, and further show support through the allocation of funds by directing administration to include in the budget. Anybody want to make that motion?
I'd be willing to make that, Merrill.
Okay, Brian's willing to make that motion. All those in favor, Jennifer,
In favor.
Tamara,
In favor.
Levitt,
In favor.
Brian made the motion. John, are you back? Okay, John's trying to get back in. Murray?
I'm back and I'm in favor,
Okay.
I think. What was the motion?
We were taking all your per diems to get the internet out to Brian.
That's good. I'm in favor of that.
Murray?
In favor.
And Merrill's in favor. It's to just continue to support the ongoing participation in the Southern Alberta Connectivity Partnership is basically what the motion was all about.
I figured so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, next one is rural broadband.
Okay, and this one again is with Bryce. It's essentially a $30,000 cost in 2020. So this wasn't included in the final budget figures. The agenda had already been prepared, but I guess just to ensure that we want to include another $30,000 in expenditures for the rural broadband strategy.
Okay. Anybody want to discuss that? Anybody want to continue working on that one? Is up to a maximum of $30,000 support to continue the development of the rural broadband strategy. And like Arlos explained the other day at council, eventually these two projects kind of end up merging. You want to talk to that?
Yeah, I do believe at some point they will intersect. Bryce can probably provide more detailed on an operational level when that happens, but at this point in time, they are two distinct projects.
Okay, there's a suggested motion. If anybody's interested in making a motion on this one, that council.
I will make that
Okay.
I will make that motion.
Okay.
That council supports the development of the rural broadband strategy to a maximum cost of $30,000 and to include the rest of the recommended motion.
Okay. Jennifer's given us a motion. All in favor? Tamara?
In favor.
Levitt?
In favor.
Brian?
In favor.
John?
In favor.
Murray?
In favor.
Merrill's in favor. Carried. All right, so that's... Now, do we need to go back and make some motions on the budget, the earlier budget, just to bring it back to council on our next meeting?
Yeah, Brian, was there a corresponding motion with our operating budget memo, or do we want to review the capital budget aspect first?
We can review the capital budget. It shouldn't take very long. There's only a few items in the capital budget, and then we can look at motions, whether they're together or separate for the recommending the operating budget with the amendments to council.
Okay.
Okay, let's do the cap.
Before we start that, could we have a 5-minute break?
We can do that. Let's
you.
be back at 10:50, and I've got 10:43 right now. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Okay.
Or if everybody shows that their face is back on, then we know everybody's ready.
Okay. Sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you.